Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time when marriage wasn't about romance, swiping right, or candlelit dinners. It was more like a family spreadsheet come to life. Yes, tonight we're heading into the medieval world of arranged marriages. And let's just say, if you're under 10 years old, you might already be late to the party. You'll find yourself in a world of wooden spoons, itchy wool clothes, and a surprising number of conversations that start with, "So, who's your family thinking of marrying you to?" You might not even be able to read yet, but hey, someone somewhere already picked your future spouse. And no, you don't get a say. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to know where you're listening from and what time it is. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's say you're born in the year 1312. Congratulations. The sky is gray, the floor is dirt, and depending on your parents' social status, your life is either already planned out or about to get very practical. From the moment you pop into this world, people start measuring your worth in dowries and alliances. If you're a girl, your family's thinking, she has good hips, might carry strong sons. If you're a boy, he better learn how to plow. We'll need a good prize for him. Now, you might be wondering, how early are we talking? Exactly. Well, medieval marriageable age is a bit stretchy. Canon law, this church law says girls can marry at 12 and boys at 14. But in many communities, especially in rural areas, folks treat these numbers more like suggestions than rules. You could be betrothed, basically a year taken sticker, as young as 5 or 6. Sometimes even earlier, like toddler age early, because hey, it's never too soon to secure an alliance with a neighbor's cowherd. Betrothals are like medieval placeholders, a way for families to say, we call dibs on your kid for our kid. And once that's agreed on, you might even wear a tiny ring and practice writing your fiancé's name in the dirt with a stick. How romantic? Of course, not all marriages happen right away. A 5-year-old bride isn't exactly expected to cook stew and manage a household just yet. Often, the formal wedding wouldn't happen until a few years later, sometimes when the couple was in their teens, sometimes when they were a bit older. But once that agreement's in place, it's taken seriously. Breaking a betrothal, big deal. Social scandal, dowry drama, occasionally full-on feuds. The medieval version of canceling an engagement could lead to actual, like, sword fights. If you were born into nobility, the stakes are even higher. Your marriage isn't just about forming a happy home, it's about land, titles, influence. Marrying off a daughter isn't losing a family member, it's deploying a strategic asset. But what if you're a peasant? Well, even the humblest families care about timing. You're expected to marry young enough to have plenty of kids to help on the land, but not so young that you become a burden. Your parents might start scouting other village families early, checking who's got the best cows, or whose kids already have sturdy hands. No, really, good risk could be a plus. Of course, there are exceptions. Some towns had customs requiring both parties to reach a certain age or show basic skills like knowing how to make bread or herd geese before the marriage was considered valid. Yes, there are cases where 12-year-old marriages occurred, but it didn't mean they started living together right away. Many medieval couples waited years before officially cohabiting. That married at 12 headline, sometimes more technical than literal. Still, the fact remains, your childhood isn't really yours alone. It's on loan to your family's future plans. You might be playing with a rag doll in the morning and promise to a boy from the next village by dinner. And what did the kids think? Did they dream of love? Were they terrified? Hard to say. Most of them left no diaries, no tic-tacs, not even angry parchment notes. But historians guess kids were probably just kids. They accepted what was around them. If everyone you know gets married young, it doesn't seem strange. That's just life. Of course, modern historians still debate how widespread very early marriages were. Some argue they were relatively rare outside of elite families. Others point to parish records that suggest a surprising number of teens already had kids of their own. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in the muddy middle. So here you are, maybe 8, maybe 9, maybe still missing a few baby teeth, and someone's already imagining what kind of spouse you'll be. You're not just a kid, you're a future alliance. Your betrothal has been arranged. Congrats. You're technically engaged now, which means you're probably getting more stares at the village well and fewer minutes to play stake games. But here's a question that medieval parents took very seriously. How exactly do you prepare a child for marriage when said child still eats dirt and thinks you are best friends? That's right, tonight we're talking about training for marriage, medieval style. Once the marriage is on the horizon, even if it's still years away, your life begins to gently or not so gently reorient. For girls, this could mean your mother, your aunt, or even a hired wit nurse starts introducing you to all the good wife skills: spinning thread, baking without burning the cottage down, and, most importantly, knowing when to be quiet. Oh, and don't forget embroidery. If you couldn't make a decent tapestry, were you even a real lady? Your daily routine might shift from playtime to practice time. Wake up, tend the chickens, learn how to measure flour by handfuls, recite a prayer, try not to trip over the goat on your way to fetch water. All essential skills for the medieval wife in training. And if you're a boy, well, if you're lucky enough to be a noble, you're probably shipped off as a page to another noble family around age 7. There, you'll carry swords you're not allowed to swing and get yelled at for tracking mud into the hall. But slowly, you'll learn how to ride, how to bow, and very important, how to drink wine without coughing. Knights need etiquette too. If you're a peasant boy, you'll stay home and learn how to plow, mend fences, and carry heavy things. Sometimes your training includes important village tasks like scaring crows or herding pigs. Hey, somebody's got to do it. For both sexes, learning the right social signals is key. When to speak, when to bow, when to be silent even if you're sure you're right. Marriage, after all, isn't just a personal milestone, it's a performance. A show for the family, the church, the village. Speaking of which, let's not forget the church's role in all this. Priests often acted as educators, moral instructors, and low-key marriage counselors. They reminded you of your duties, faithfulness, patience, beyond. If you were noble, they might even test your Latin, because nothing says romance like conjugating verbs. Now, this might sound structured, and it often was, but keep in mind that medieval Europe wasn't uniform. Customs varied wildly from town to town, even farm to farm. In parts of Italy, you might start dowry negotiations before you lose your baby teeth. In Ireland, a courtship might last several years, with gifts passed back and forth. In Scandinavia, a girl might inherit a farm and need to learn how to negotiate livestock prices long before she walks down any kind of aisle. And yes, sometimes kids rebelled. There are scattered records of teenagers refusing arranged marriages, running away to join monasteries, or even falling in love with someone completely unsuitable. But these are rare, and often ended with parents negotiating a hasty forgiveness, or a marriage anyway. Historians still debate how strict this training really was. Some argue that most peasants learned it by watching, not formal instruction. Others believe girls especially were rigorously shaped by their mothers to become the ideal wife, which, let's be honest, mostly meant quiet and handy with a cauldron. There's also the question of emotional preparation or lack thereof. Did anyone sit you down and say, marriage can be hard? Probably not. More likely, you were told, this is your duty, and handed a basket of onions to peel. So here you are, 10 years old, maybe 11. You've just learned how to knead dough without it sticking to your elbows, and you're being praised for your matronly potential. You're not sure what that means, but it sounds like your doll days are numbered. And as you lie in bed on your straw mattress, you overhear your parents whispering about land, goats, or whether you're betrothed as strong calves. It's not exactly a fairy tale, but in your world, it's the beginning of a life. The next morning, you practice curtsying again. So, now that you're on the official track to becoming someone's spousary, or notice time to talk about dowries and bride prices. Those slightly awkward but extremely important medieval transactions that basically put a price tag on your romantic potential. First off, let's get one thing straight. You're not being sold. You're just being financially repositioned with goats and maybe a silver spoon. If you're a girl, your family is expected to provide a dowry, a bundle of assets, money, household goods, or sometimes a sheep or two with you to your future husband's home. This wasn't just generosity. It was practical. The idea was that your dowry would help you and your husband set up a new household. You know, like a medieval starter pack, quilts, pans, a chicken, maybe a tiny plot of land if your family was fancy. The size of your dowry depends on your social rank, your family's wealth, and, occasionally, your father's mood. If you're a noblewoman, your dowry might include a castle, some farmland, and a clause about not attacking your cousin's territory during Lent. If you're a peasant girl, you might bring along a small wooden chest with a single nice dress, a jug, and your prized butter paddle. Now, if you're a boy, or more accurately, your family, you might be paying a bride price instead. This wasn't universal, but in many regions, and particularly among lower classes or tribal cultures, the groom's family offered gifts or money to the bride's family as a kind of thank you for raising a decent daughter who can make stew and survive childbirth. Romantic, right? Sometimes these transactions went both ways, dowry and bride price. It was a complex dance of who gives what, when, and why. And if someone changed their mind, oh boy, get ready for lawsuits, shouting, and probably a sermon from the local priest. But let's not pretend this was all cold economics. Often, these exchanges had deep symbolic value. A goat might not seem like much to you, but to a family in 14th century Bohemia, it might represent survival, honor, or even love in a very practical, hopes in a kind of way. Here's where it gets more interesting. Historians still argue over the real function of dowries. Some say they were a way to ensure women had some security in marriage. Others argue they were more about controlling inheritance and keeping land within bloodlines. Either way, they weren't just optional add-ons. Forgetting or under-delivering a dowry could actually nullify a marriage. Yep, no goats, no vows. You might think this sounds like a lot of pressure. You'd be right. Families sometimes went into debt trying to put together a suitable dowry. Daughters might have to wait years for their brothers to get married first because funds were limited and dowries weren't cheap. And get this, there were dowry inventories, literal lists of what you're bringing to your new life. Sometimes read aloud at the wedding. Talk about airing your laundry and your linen count. In parts of Italy, dowry chests called cassoni were elaborately decorated, often with painted scenes of virtue, loyalty, or bizarrely Greek myths. Nothing like a picture of Hercules wrestling a lion to say, "Welcome to married life." Meanwhile, over in parts of West Africa, bride prices included salt, kola nuts, and cloth essentials that were deeply tied to local trade and tradition. In Japan's medieval period, the samurai class treated dowries like political alliances, sometimes pairing armor with scrolls of poetry, because who says you can't be deadly and romantic? One particularly funny story, in medieval Wales, a dowry might include a cow that had to be guaranteed of good temperament, because nobody wants a moody cow as their marital blessing. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, if a woman died childless, the dowry went back to her family. Yes, that's right. Even your personal linen could be returned if your womb didn't deliver. Medieval inheritance law could be, well, let's just say complicated. So there you are. Maybe you're standing quietly in the corner, while your parents argue over whether to include a second duck. You don't get much say, but you're watching, learning, absorbing what this strange, complex process actually means. You might not feel ready, but your trousseau is almost packed. You've just turned 16 grads. You can now officially be claimed. That's right, today. You hear a strange new word whispered around the cottage, betrothal. And no, this doesn't mean candlelight proposals or secret love letters. In your world, it means a sheepskin scroll, a pot of stew, and a families eyeing each other like rival merchants at market. This morning, your father actually shaved his beard, a rare event, and put on his finest blue wool tunic, one he usually saves for Easter. He ruffles your hair with one hand and says, "We're going to visit the Johnson's farm today." You think it might be for play, but then you spot your mother holding a basket full of eggs, wearing the look she usually reserves for business and pleasure. You set off down the dirt path, the frowsy nut crunching under your little leather shoes. All around you, the early morning fog hangs low, making everything feel just a little more serious than usual. Your parents are whispering behind you. Hope they're still willing. His family's pasture is well drained. The girl's teeth are straight, could be worse. When you arrive, The Johnsons are already waiting in their muddy courtyard. Their son is a couple years older than you. With last winter's frostbite still leaving traces on his cheeks, he glances at you and immediately starts inspecting his own boots, like they're the most interesting thing in the world. No one really talks to you. The adults talk around you. Your father praises your ability to carry water and not drop the jug this time. Their mother says her son is already learning to handle a plow. There are long pauses between comments, like each family is mentally calculating dowries, land access, and which cousin once stole a chicken from whom. Then comes the betrothal gift your parents hand over the ex, plus a small wool scarf your grandmother spun. In return, they give you a token, a tiny silver ring. It's a bit loose on your finger, but the weight of it feels heavier than anything you've ever worn. Let the children walk together. Someone says, it's not a request. So now you're awkwardly shuffling along beside this boy who might someday be your husband. He says nothing. You say nothing. Eventually, he points at a dead frog by the road and says, bet I could throw that to the tree. Romance. Back home, your mother's quietly proud. Your father's already mentioning the next steps, which you don't quite understand. You still don't really know what betrothal meant to me, that things feel different now. In the weeks that follow, your life doesn't change much. You still feed chickens, help patch the roof, play with sticks, but now you're spoken for. Kids tease you about it. Oh, Lady Johnson, they sing when you walk by. You try to kick them. You catch yourself tracing his name in the dirt with a twig one afternoon. Then you stomp it out, just in case someone sees. Historians still debate how full these child betrothals really were. Some argue they were symbolic, a kind of future promise without real commitment. Others point to legal records, showing that even childhood engagements could lead to lawsuits if broken. As usual, the truth probably varies from village to village, family to family. But for you, it's real enough. You've got the ring, the frog-throwing fiancé, and a family already calling you practically married. You're 9 now. You've had 3 growth spurts to pet chickens, and exactly 0 say in the fact that your future has been decided for you. The betrothal ring still lives in a small linen pouch, tied to your belt unless your little cousin steals it again, in which case it lives in her mouth until someone yells. But today, something's different. Your mother is in a flurry. She's scrubbing your ears, like she's preparing you for sainthood, and muttering things like, the priest will be watching, and no fidgeting during the vows. Wait, vows. Apparently, there's a fair in the next village over, and guess what? That's when they're doing a public affirmation of betrothals. Think of it like the medieval version of an engagement party, only with fewer pastries and more goats. You arrive at the village center, where colorful banners flap gently in the wind, and someone's cousin is trying to tune a hurdy-gurdy. The air smells like roasted turnips and sheep. All around you, other children stand beside each other, looking either deeply confused, vaguely embarrassed, or like they just want to go back home and play with mud. When your name is called, you step forward beside your betrothed. He's grown taller since the frog-throwing days, and now has actual words in his vocabulary. Today, he nods politely at you. Progress. The priest begins mumbling in that only about 3 people actually understand a 10. Then, in the common tongue, he starts listing the expectations of marriage. Be faithful. Be fruitful. Don't run off to become a nun or a monk without telling anyone. The usual? Then, the 2 of you are invited to exchange symbolic gifts. You hand over a sprig of lavender. Your mother insisted it was ladylike, and it gives you a tiny wooden carving of a bird. It looks vaguely like a pigeon, but it's hard to say. People clap. A pig snorts in approval. This isn't the wedding. Not yet, but it does mean the agreement is now formal. Breaking it would be a scandal. A very, very big one. In medieval times, betrothals weren't just casual promises, they were serious business. Under canon law, a betrothal made in front of witnesses could, in some cases, be legally binding, especially if there was consent, even whispered, awkward consent, and a gift was exchanged. Yes, even if you were 9 or 6, the church tried its best to regulate this. In fact, The fourth letter on Council of 1215 specifically addressed problems like underage marriages and secret unions, but enforcement spotty at best. In rural communities, custom ruled all. If your parents and the priest nodded, you were as good as Wednesday in spirit. If not yet in practice, after the fair, your family is in good spirits. Your father slaps the other boy's father on the back and jokes, "We'll be in-laws before you know it." Your mother beams as she recounts the priest's words for the fifth time to your aunt. And you just want to get out of your itchy tunic and chase geese by the pond. You don't feel like someone's future wife. You feel like a kid who was forced to stand still for way too long. But still, when no one's looking, you take out the little wooden bird. You trace the wings with your finger. It's clumsily carved, uneven, probably rush-ed, but somehow you like it. You tuck it in the pouch with your ring, just in case. The days after the betrothal fair drift by and the usual rhythm, feeding the chickens, scraping mud off your shoes, and pretending you didn't just get half married last week. Life hasn't changed much on the surface, but under the skin, things are shifting. You're 10 now, and suddenly, adults around you speak just a little differently when they think you're not listening. "She'll be a fine wife one day," someone says at the market, glancing at you over a wheel of cheese. "She's growing fast." Another whispers, "Might be ready by 13. Ready for what? Exactly, you ask once. Just once. The answer is a long silence, and then you'll understand when you're older. Very helpful. At home, your chores subtly change. Your mother begins teaching you how to make stews, not just how to peel onions. You're shown how to spin wool without snarling the thread like a cat. You even get a little lesson in how to fold sheets the proper way, which apparently means with your back straight and no complaints. Meanwhile, the boy you're betrothed to, he's out learning how to keep sheep from wandering into the woods and, more importantly, how to look serious in front of elders. He waves at you once across a field. You wave back, then both of you pretend it didn't happen. Here's where things get weird. According to the law, and we're talking canon law, a gay marriage is valid if both parties consent and are of legal age. 12 for girls, 14 for boys. But the concept of consent is medieval murky, especially when you're 10 and your yes is really just repeating what your parents whispered in your ear that morning. So technically, you're still a child, but socially, you're being groomed into adulthood at a pace that would make modern child psychologists cry into their cappuccinos. Now let's zoom in on a curious fact. In many regions of medieval Europe, especially among peasants, the age at which you moved in with your spouse was not always the same as the age you got married on paper. Some couples were formally married at 12 or 13, but didn't start living together until 15 or even 18. Think of it like medieval long engagement, only with legal bindings and no Pinterest board. Historians still debate this, by the way. Some argue early marriages were mostly ceremonial and not consummated until the couple was physically and mentally ready by medieval standards. Others insist early cohabitation was more common than we think, especially in places where having more babies sooner meant more labor for the fields. Your village, probably somewhere in between. At dinner, your mother says you'll be spending more time at your betrothed's household during the harvest, not to live there yet. She adds that to get used to it, a kind of medieval internship for marriage. You choke on your barley soup, and here's the thing. No one thinks this is weird. Not your parents, not the neighbors, not even the hands scratching around your feet. Because in their world, this is life. No mystery, no magic, just the long, slow march toward adulthood, with milestones like can thread a needle without stabbing self, and knows how to milk a goat without swearing. That night, lying on your straw mattress, you stare at the rafters. There's a spider building a very impressive web in the corner. You wonder if spiders ever have to get married. Probably not. Lucky things. Harvest comes early this year. The fields go from green to gold almost overnight, and suddenly, everyone in the village is busy from sunup to sundown. And guess who's not just helping in your own household anymore? Yep, you, as promised. Well, Promised is a strong word. You start spending part of each date over at your betrothed's farm. It's not official cohabitation, but it's definitely a kind of preview, a test run, like trying on shoes you already paid for. The first morning, your mother brushes your hair, ties your wool shawl a bit tighter, and mutters something like, "Smile at his grandmother. She always notices bad posture." You nod, trying not to cry into your breakfast porridge. And off you go. His family's home smells like boiled cabbage and smoke. The floors are swept with stiff reeds. His mother eyes you like a head of lettuce she's not sure is fresh. His father gives you a firm nod, and your almost husband. He turns beet red and immediately drops the bucket he's carrying. Romance. Your tasks are familiar: shelling peas, turning compost, carrying water, but they feel heavier here. Like each one is a performance. Like you're constantly being evaluated. Are you cheerful? Are you obedient? Can you wring out a wet tunic without twisting your face like you're being tortured? It's exhausting, and yet, strangely, you get used to it. You and your future spouse begin to develop a kind of rhythm. You don't talk much, still more comfortable with sheep and people, but you start handing him tools before he asks. He starts leaving the last piece of bread for you. It's not much, but in medieval terms, that's basically flirting. Now, let's talk logistics, because what you're doing has a name. In some areas, this was known as fostering or placement, a common practice where a betrothed child, usually the girl, would be sent to live or work in the future in-law's home well before the marriage was finalized. Sometimes it was practical, sometimes strategic, sometimes just a way to make sure everyone involved was still on board. And it wasn't limited to peasants. Nobles did it too. A duke might send his daughter to the castle of her future husband's family to be raised in their portly customs of how to pour wine without spilling it on silk. There's even some evidence, and yes, scholars argue about this endlessly, that these arrangements doubled as insurance policies. If the match fell through, at least the girl had skills and connections she might use later. That is, if she wasn't utterly traumatized by peeling root vegetables for 5 years. Back in your world, the days blur together, chopping onions, fixing fences, learning how to kneel without your knees locking up during prayer. His mother starts teaching you how to keep accounts, not with numbers, but with memory. We sold 1 pig last Michaelmas and to the year before, she says, stirring stew with one hand and swatting flies with the other. Next year, we'll breed 3. You need to remember that. You nod. You will, because here's the unspoken truth behind all of this. Marriage isn't just about feelings. It's about function. You're being prepared not to fall in love, but to run a small economic unit. One day, he hands you a flower, a slightly wilted one, granted, but a flower. You say thank you. He shrugs and mumbles something about saw it growing near the ditch. You smile anyway, and for a moment, just a tiny one, you forget the expectations, the chores, the looming adulthood. You're just two kids in a field, under a sky so big it swallows everything. The moment doesn't last, but maybe that's okay. Autumn rolls in with a chill, and suddenly everything smells like smoke and damp wool. The sun takes longer to rise, the mornings are foggier, and your breath turns into little clouds when you exhale. You're still splitting time between your family's home and your betrothed's. The lines between us and them are starting to blur. You know where they keep the spoons. They've stopped calling you the girl. You're not officially married yet, but in practice, you kind of are. But today, something new happens. A priest is coming to visit, and you know what that means. No, not confession, though. Yes, you've been warned to think clean thoughts. It's about the talk, the one where you learn what marriage is actually going to involve. The religious part, the sacrament part, until no one says it direct life how babies happen part. Except no one says it like that, either. Instead, the priest arrives with a serious face and a small leather-bound book. He smells like old incense and anxiety. You're summoned into the tiny chapel near the village square, with your betrothed sitting beside you, both of you trying not to make eye contact or laugh nervously. He begins by explaining that marriage is a holy union, a sacred bond, a metaphor for the relationship between Christ and the church. You pretend to understand this. It's not just a social contract, it's a spiritual one. He talks about vows, about duty, about obedience, mostly yours, about consent. Yes, your praise. The church does require your consent for the marriage to be valid. Even back in the 1300s, canon law held that both parties had to agree, freely and willingly, to be married, of course. Whether the consent is truly free when you're 9 and sitting next to your future in-laws is a whole separate debate, and scholars still do debate it. Some say the church was a surprisingly progressive force, protecting young brides from coercion. Others argue it was more about legal loopholes than empowerment. But either way, you'll be asked if you agree. Spoiler, you will. You've been trained to. After the priest finishes his little sermon, he looks at both of you with an expression that says, "Any questions?" but also clearly hopes you won't have any. You don't. Later, you ask your mother what exactly is supposed to happen after the wedding. She gives you a look, a long one, then says, "You know when it's time," which, frankly, is not helpful. But don't worry, the rest of the village is more than willing to fill in the gaps. You overhear whispers, half-jokes, warnings disguised as riddles. Some of the older girls giggle when you walk by. One even hands you a woven charm for fertility. You're not sure what fertility is, but you accept it politely. Meanwhile, preparations for the actual ceremony are starting. It may not be scheduled yet, but plans are being made. Your parents are checking on the dowry arrangements. His family is inspecting the old wedding linens, and the priest, he's making a list of who'll need to confess before the big day. And you're practicing how to kneel gracefully in a dress that doesn't let you bend your knees properly. Because here's another medieval twist. Even though you're still a child, everything is happening on adult terms. The church views marriage as sacred. Yes, but also as practical. If the match is good, if the families approve, if the dowry is set, if the fields are stable, if no one's got plague, then let's go. Why wait? Still, not every wedding went through. Betrothals could break down. Priests could intervene. Disagreements over dowries or scandals in the village could postpone or cancel a union entirely. And once again, historians argue over just how binding these early promises really were. In theory, betrothal wasn't marriage. In practice, often, it may as well have been. But tonight, under a wool blanket that smells faintly of hay and wood smoke, you think about what the priest said about duty, about vows, about sacredness. You stare at the wooden ceiling of your family's hut and wonder what kind of life this is going to be. You've been promised. You've been placed. Soon, you'll be Wednesday. And for better or worse, you're starting to understand what that actually means. The air is crisp with the first hints of winter, and the fields outside are mostly bare, except for a few stubborn stalks and some clucking chickens trying to pack the last of the season's scraps. You wake to the sound of fabric being rustled by your mother folding linens, carefully checking embroidery threads for any loose ends. Something's in the air. It's not the wedding yet, but a smaller ceremony is being planned, a public affirmation of your betrothal. Sometimes called a handfasting or a formal blessing. Think of it like a medieval pre-engagement party, with way more church incense and slightly fewer snacks. Today, your name is being written into the parish records next to your betrothed's. The priest calls it an announcement of intent, but to you, it feels like something more, like stepping into a pair of shoes you're not done growing into yet. You're dressed in your nicest tunic indigo with a frayed hem. Your mother tried to hide by sewing on a ribbon. Your hair is braided tightly, which is code for please behave with dignity, and your hands are scrubbed raw from the morning wash. Everyone gathers near the small village church, which looks perpetually sleepy with its crooked doorway and mossy stones. The priest stands with a roll of parchment, squinting to read names. A few villagers murmur in approval. Others are just here for the spectacle. You and your betrothed are called forward. You shuffle awkwardly on the gravel. He mutters something under his breath, possibly out because someone stepped on his foot. The priest blesses the union with a sprinkling of holy water and a few Latin phrases. You definitely don't understand, but nod solemnly to anyway. Then he announces the match to the crowd. That's the key part. Everyone must hear it. Because in the medieval world, if a wedding is secret, it's suspicious. If it's public, it's legitimate. There's even a church rule called banns of marriage, which requires the priest to announce your engagement publicly for 3 consecutive Sundays. It's like a speak now or forever hold your peace system, but drawn out over several weeks. That way, if anyone knows a reason you should marry, like if your fiancé already promised himself to someone else if they have time to object. Very noble in theory. In practice, most people cap their objections to whisper gossip and side eyes. After the little ceremony, you're given a small ribbon tied around your wrist, a symbolic gesture, not quite a ring, but it means the same. You're taken, not yours anymore. You're theirs now. Then comes the walking. Yes, walking, one of those inexplicable medieval customs where, after being blessed, the couple walks together around the village square, hand in hand, while people throw herbs or stale bread for luck. Allegedly and seen badly in the background, it's weirdly festive. Your betrothed's little brother chases chickens behind you. Someone plays a bone flute. An old woman insists on touching your forehead to check for fertility. You're pretty sure that's not a real test, but she does it anyway. By the time you make it back home, your cheeks are pink and your feet are sore. But something shifted. People look at you differently, like you're not a child anymore. Even though, spoiler, you absolutely still are. Your father pats your shoulder with a kind of heavy finality. Your mother looks relieved, and your betrothed, he hands you a small wooden charm shaped like a cat, says nothing, just shrugs. You pocket it. You sleep that night with your wrist ribbon still on, wondering what it means to be bound. Is it about love? Is it about rules? Or is it just another thing you're supposed to do? Because everyone before you did it too. Historians still argue over how emotionally involved kids were in their own betrothals. Some say children barely understood what was happening. Others point to records showing real affection developing over time. Maybe it depended on the people. Maybe it depended on how many songs were sung off key during your walk around the square. What's certain is this: the match is now a community fact, a social truth. And once something is said in public, with enough people listening, it's real. It's spring now. Earth has shaken off its sleep. Lambs are bleating in the distance, and the village smells faintly of wet straw and wild garlic. You've grown a little taller. Your betrothed's voice is doing that weird crackly thing, where it sounds like both a bird and a bear, depending on the time of day. But more importantly, the marriage talk is no longer theoretical. Your family has begun dowry negotiations. Now, you might be imagining scrolls of parchment, legal debates, and dramatic contract signings with quills, but really, it's more like your father and your future father-in-law standing in a cold room, sipping weak ale and arguing over how many goats your body is worth. You're not in the room, of course. This part is strictly grown men with opinions territory. Your mother might whisper updates later in the kitchen, but officially, your presence isn't required or wanted. The dowry called das in Latin, because everything church-related sounds fancier in Latin, isn't just a gift, it's insurance. Your family is offering property, livestock, cloth, or coins to help you start your new household, but also to prove you're a worthy match. If the marriage ends for any reason, death, scandal, spontaneous dragon attack, the dowry is supposed to offer you a tiny cushion. That's the theory. In practice, recovering a dowry can be harder than retrieving your favorite sock from a 14th century communal wash bucket. Some girls bring huge dowries, entire plots of land, bolts of imported silk, even promises of political support. Others, like you, bring more modest offerings, maybe a goat, maybe a copper pan, maybe that embroidered pillow your grandmother made that smells like lavender and cooked onions. Meanwhile, your future husband's family is negotiating the dower they'll give you. That's your long-term security, the bit of his property set aside for you to live off if he dies first. Yes, they're already thinking about that. No, it's not creepy. It's practical, morbidly practical. You peek into the storeroom. where your mother is assembling your dowry trunk. It's older and used it before you, but she's relining it with linen and patching up the corners with a needle so fine it looks like it belongs in a fairy tale. She's packed wool blankets, a wooden comb, to ceramic cups both slightly chipped, and a single silver pin to hold your veil, she says. Even though you don't wear one yet, she adds a packet of dried herbs, rosemary for memory and thyme for courage. You smile. Then she slips in a folded note. Don't read it yet, she says. It's for after. After what? You don't ask. Outside, you see your betrothed hauling a bucket toward the stable, his shoulders hunched, his tunic patched at the elbow. He glances your way but doesn't wave. The silence isn't awkward. It's just normal. Some historians think these betrothals were purely transactional. Others argue there was often tenderness, quiet bonds that formed over time. Like ivy growing slowly up a wall, no love at first sight, but maybe love at fifth harvest. Meanwhile, rumors swirl in the village about another match gone bad. A girl refused to marry her cousin, and now the family's in a feud so bitter even the pics seem tense. That's the thing. Breaking a marriage contract is not just a family matter. It's a community event. People gossip, relationships fray, and in some regions, legal penalties follow. You could be fined, sued, shunned. So your parents are being careful, and you're trying to imagine a house of your own, maybe with a small garden, maybe with chickens that don't attack your ankles. You imagine sharing bread in the morning and sleeping near a fire in the winter. You don't picture passion or roses, toast, or courtly things. For bards and nobles, you picture someone who doesn't leave crumbs in the bed. As the sun sets, your mother lights a beeswax candle and continues sewing. You sit beside her, quietly. One day, this household will no longer be yours. You'll be the woman in another home, threading your own daughter's needle. But tonight, you're still the girl, still waiting. It's the evening before your wedding. You sit on a low stool by the hearth, your fingers fiddling with a bit of frayed thread at the edge of your tunic. Everything smells like dried lavender and smoke, and your stomach has decided to practice somersaults even though dinner was 3 hours ago. Around you, the house buzzes with preparation. Bread baking, linens airing out, cousins arriving uninvited. The cat has decided to climb into the wedding basket twice. You're told this is a happy day, or at least the beginning of one. But if you feel a bit like a prize lamb being polished up for market, well, you're not alone. Plenty of medieval brides felt more ceremonial than celebratory. This is your wedding night, but don't panic just yet. We'll get to that first. Let's talk about the spectacle. Weddings in your village aren't lavish affairs, but they're loud. Think bells ringing, neighbors singing off-key, and at least one child crying because someone took the last honey fig. You wear your best tunic dyed weighty blue. If you're lucky, and your hair is braided in a crown around your head, secured with ribbon and an uncomfortable number of pins. If you were noble, your veil would be silk. Instead, it's linen, and slightly crooked. That's okay. The goat you grew up with probably isn't impressed either way. The ceremony is short. Medieval weddings, especially among commoners, often take place right outside the church doors. Literally, it's a symbolic threshold, and everyone stands around in the mud pretending not to shiver. The priest recites your vows in Latin. You repeat them in your own language, more or less. If you mess up the words, don't worry. As long as the intent is clear and there are witnesses, it's official. A ring is slipped on your finger. A cloth may be draped over your shoulders, symbolizing your new unity. Someone throws grain. Someone else sneezes. A drunk uncle shouts something about fertility. Classic. Now here's the part everyone's been whispering about, the bedding. Ah yes, the awkward parade. Depending on local custom, you might be escorted to the marriage bed by a crowd of well-meaning relatives. Some might carry candles, others might sing lewd songs, and yes, in some regions, someone actually throws the couple onto the bed while making fertility jokes. This part varies wildly depending on time and place. In some noble houses, there's even a witnessing ritual which is exactly as uncomfortable as it sounds. Thankfully, you're not noble, In your case, they shut the door and leave. Just you and your new husband. Now, here's where the scholarly debate gets spicy. Some historians insist many of these weddings weren't consummated for years, especially if the bride was very young. Others argue that the church expected consummation pretty much immediately, or at least within a reasonable window. There's plenty of evidence either way, so the consensus is still somewhere in the murky middle. You lie in the dim room, listening to the crickets and the distant clang of a drop pan in the kitchen. Your husband sits on the other side of the straw mattress, fidgeting with his sleeve. No one talks about what's supposed to happen next. Not really. You've been told vaguely that you become one flesh, whatever that means. He offers you a cup of water. You accept it. Sometimes, intimacy in the Middle Ages wasn't romantic. It was quiet, cautious, or just awkward, especially when both people were barely teenagers and had zero idea what they were doing. And yet some couples, even those arranged in childhood, grew fond of one another. Letters from later centuries hint at tenderness, inside jokes, shared burdens. So maybe tonight isn't about perfection. Maybe it's about starting something, anything, outside. Your mother lights a candle in the window. It's an old tradition. A silent wish. May the house stay warm. May the heart stay soft. May the chicken coop finally get fixed. You smile a little at that last thought because even on your wedding night, you're still yourself. And the world, noisy and strange as it is, keeps turning. You wake up to the smell of bread, chickens clucking, and the muffled laughter of your younger siblings spying through a crack in the door. Welcome to married life. The wedding night is behind you, whether it was awkward, silent, or full of candlelit dreams. Now comes the real part of the marriage, living together, day after day, year after year, hopefully, without killing each other over who forgot to fetch water from the well. In medieval times, this is where marriage truly started, with the vows, not with the feast, but with the merging of routines. And depending on your status, the daily life looks very different. If you're a peasant, your home is likely one room, maybe two if your family's done well. The hearth is the center of everything, cooking, warmth, light, even the place where your new sleeping mat is rolled out. Privacy, not really a thing. You're used to it. Everyone in the household, including grandma and the cousin who never stops humming, all live under the same roof. So when you bicker about chores, it's with an audience. If you're from the merchant class or minor nobility, you might have a room to yourself and your spouse, luxurious, maybe even a chest of linens. And if you're very lucky, a bed with curtains, fancy. This also means more responsibility. A small household staff, accounts to manage, livestock to monitor, children to keep alive and vaguely clean. Ah yes, children, that's the next thing people start talking about, or rather, whispering loudly. Your parents drop not so subtle comments. The neighbor smiles and pats your arm and says things like, "Any little ones yet? You're 16, maybe younger." But fertility is central to medieval marriage, especially for women. Having children is both expected and necessary, not just for love, but for survival. Children mean labor, they mean lineage, they mean the family farm has a future. And the stakes, high. Infant mortality is brutally common. Nearly 1 in 3 babies might not survive past their first birthday. Mothers face enormous risks in childbirth. You've seen women disappear behind drawn curtains and reemerge days later, with either swallowed bundles or solemn silence. Yet somehow, people keep trying. They keep hoping. Meanwhile, your role in the household shifts rapidly. If you're a woman, you're now expected to manage the domestic sphere. That means brewing ale, making butter, spinning wool, managing the pantry. It also means being a nurse, counselor, and occasional chicken chaser. And when harvest comes, out into the fields you go, baby slung on hip, helping pull onions from the earth. If you're the husband, your world is outside the home, deeply tied to it. You tend fields, mend fences, attend village meetings. You trade in the market. You pay your tithes. You argue over grazing rights and occasionally help dig ditches for someone's new pigsty. Romantic, right? The work is constant, the rhythm unchanging. Sunrise, labor, bruh, prayer, rest, repeat. But in between all this practicality, something strange happens. You learn about each other. You know who prefers theirs to thick, who snores, who sings off key when no one's listening, and slowly, in ways that surprise even you, the awkward stranger you marry becomes familiar. Then maybe fortune's kind of friend. Of course, not all marriages are kind. Some are cold, distant, or even cruel. There are records of women begging the church for annulments due to abuse, abandonment, or inability to perform marital duties. Yes, that was a real thing. But those cases were rare and difficult. For most people, marriage was binding, effective life. Still, not all was bleak. There's evidence, especially in pastoral letters and village records, that many couples found humor, companionship, even affection. After all, if you're going to spend decades hauling buckets and chasing goats with someone, you might as well share a laugh now and then. So here you are, a newlywed. Your hands smell like barley. Your spouse just sneezed flour across the room. And somehow, even in this muddy, unpredictable medieval life, things are beginning to feel like home. Married life moves quickly in the Middle Ages. Before you've even figured out how to keep the fire from smoking up the whole cottage, you're already being called ma or da by tiny humans with permanent jam stains on their tunics. Yes, parenthood has arrived. Your first child is a milestone, not just personally, but socially. Having children proves your marriage is working. It boosts your status in the village, strengthens family alliances, and, depending on the gender of the baby, might even spark a feast or a lot of quiet disappointment. Because let's face it, everyone's hoping for a boy. Boys mean labor and legacy. Girls mean dowries. That's the hard truth of medieval family math. And yet, there's joy. The first time a baby grabs your finger. The first time you watch your toddler totter barefoot across packed dirt. In between the struggle for survival, there are moments of warmth that soften even the most calloused of hands. But medieval parenting isn't for the faint of heart. Diapers, not really a thing. Toys, maybe a carved wooden cow if grandpa's feeling generous. You rely on swaddling, slings, and a constant eye to make sure your kid doesn't wander into the cooking fire or drink rainwater off a mossy roof tile. Education, unless you're noble, is optional for boys. Maybe the priest teaches them their letters if you can spare them from the fields. For girls, domestic skills are the curriculum. Sewing, spinning, remembering how many herbs go in stew. And then there's the church. Religion plays a huge role in raising kids. You baptize your baby within days, sometimes horse off birth by the rush, because infant mortality looms over every cradle, and unbaptized babies are thought to be in spiritual limbo. Yes, it's grim, but it shows just how tightly faith and fear are braided into medieval family life. You teach your kids early. Say your prayers, obey your elders, respect feast days, don't anger the saints. God is always watching. And probably your nosy neighbor too. Discipline. Let's just say the medieval approach isn't subtle. A mix of chores, cold stares, and the occasional wooden spoon. But also believe it or note a surprising amount of play. Children in the Middle Ages chase hoops, play tag, tell riddles, and make little clay dolls. They laugh, they sulk, they get into trouble, just like now. And here's where things get complicated, because by the time your oldest child is, say, 7 or 8, guess what? Other families are already eyeing them as future spouses. You hear whispers at the market, strong arms, good manners, the one's marriage material. Suddenly, you're on the other side of the equation, parent doing the matchmaking. And it's weird. You remember what it was like. You remember being the kid with sticky hands and no clue what a betrothal even meant. And now, you're hosting awkward meetings with the neighbors, weighing oxen counts and flax harvests, like a medieval dating app with 0 profile pictures. Some parents resist, others lean in, especially if there's an opportunity to gain land or status. You might start saving for your daughter's dowry as soon as she can walk. The money, it's your bargaining chip, and dowries aren't just coins. She might include a goat, a patch of land, or a well-sewn wool cloak. Romantic, right? By now, you're older, maybe 30, maybe 40, which in medieval terms is practically ancient. Your joints ache, your voice has more authority, and you've likely buried people you love because medieval life is short and full of sharp corners. Still, through all the hardship, something endures. You see it in the way your spouse lifts the toddler onto their shoulders, or how your eldest helps repair the roof without being asked. There's love for rented the courtly, troubadour kind sung about in castles, but the quiet, enduring kind built out of repetition, mud, and shared bread crusts. Historians still debate how loving medieval marriages were. Many insist they were purely practical arrangements, born of necessity and pressure, but others point to letters, wills, and folk songs fragments of affection that hint at something deeper. So maybe love in the Middle Ages wasn't about sweeping declarations or epic poems. Maybe it was simpler. He brought in fire when she saved the last plum. They prayed for each other during plagues. They laughed, even when their teeth were falling out. And maybe, just maybe, that counts as love too. Your children are growing fast now too fast. One minute they're tumbling around with a sheepdog, and the next, they're rolling their eyes at chores and asking if you've spoken to that boy's mother yet. Yes, they've read the rumors, maybe even caught a glance or two in the chapel courtyard. In medieval terms, that's basically dating. It's your turn to arrange a match. You gather with your spouse by the hearth one evening, sipping something warm, trying to remember which families have decent reputations and, more importantly, a bit of land or a good cheese-making aunt. You jot mental notes. The miller's daughter, sweet, but that family's been funny ever since the chicken theft incident. The thatcher's boy, broad shoulders, but not much brain behind them. Choosing a spouse for your child is like navigating a maze of gossip, dowries, reputation, and raw survival instinct. You're not aiming for happily ever after. You're aiming for, will they work hard, bear children, and survive winter? And somehow it happens. A betrothal is agreed. You pass a cup of watered wine, maybe shake hands over a loaf of bread. The kids stand awkwardly beside each other while everyone else celebrates. They might not even speak, but the deal is done. As your children begin their own journey toward marriage, you reflectize. You on the path you've taken. You were born into a world that planned your life before you had teeth. You learn it quickly that marriage isn't just a personal milestone, it's a hint point for entire families, sometimes villages. It can change fortunes, shift land, forge peace, or stir drama like yeast in a summer loaf. You've witnessed the quiet negotiations and the loud arguments. You've seen love bloom where no one expected it, and cold tolerance settle in where everyone hoped for sparks. And despite the hardship, despite the hunger, the plagues, the taxes, the church finds you've made it. You've lived through war, maybe lost some teeth, but you have stories now. You are a piece of the village's rhythm, a parent, a matchmaker, a survivor. You've even seen how the system shifts over time. By the late Middle Ages, around the 1400s, cities grow, guilds get stronger, and more young people, especially in towns, start to choose their own partners. Not always, of course, but enough that people begin to talk. The church tries to keep control over the marriage rules. On Wednesday, who must get permission, but people are slippery. They elope, they swear vows in secret. Sometimes they just move in together and hope no one notices. You hear these stories, you nod, pretending to disapprove, but inside, a part of you wonders if that's what you might have done given the chance. Because while arranged marriage is the law of your land, deep down, you've always known that love real, clumsy, unexpected love, it doesn't always follow family plans. Still, you've come to respect the order of it all. The ceremony, the stability, the sense of continuity. Like your family line is a thread woven into a larger tapestry. Even as old age creeps in and your hands grow slower, your voice still matters when people seek advice. Young parents ask, how did you manage a good match for your son? Or what dowry did you offer for your daughter? You answer with a half smile, half sigh. Sometimes you lie a little, everyone does. You see your grandchildren running in the fields now, screaming with joy. oblivious to the fact that someone's already wondering who they'll marry someday. And you can't help but laugh, because it never ends. The marriage market, the gossip, the rituals, it all keeps spinning. You're no longer a child in the story. You're the storyteller now. And one day, someone might tell your story about the time you bargained a marriage with a single sheep and a roasted goose, about the tiny gold ring your daughter wore at age 8, about the long walk through snow to deliver a wedding loaf. And maybe, just maybe, they'll say they did all right. You're older now, not just in age but in presence. You've become part of the village's furniture, the kind that creaks when the wind changes but still holds strong when someone needs a seat by the fire. It's late in the season, harvest time. You sit outside your home, watching carts of hay roll past, hearing the church bell mark vespers, feeling the sting of chill air in your joints. You wrap a shawl tighter around your shoulders. Children run past, one of them shouting something about a wedding feast next week. You smile, because this time, you're not planning the match. You're just invited. As people age in the medieval world, especially women, their role in the marriage market shifts. You're no longer a dowry to trade or a housewife to mold. You're an advisor now, a witness, a symbol of continuity, and people listen to you even if you do talk their ears off sometimes. You've earned the right. When they ask how marriage has changed, you chuckle softly, because it has, and it hasn't. The church still insists on consentance. Even back then, technically both parties had to agree. But let's be honest, if your father said yes, it was risky to say no. Still, more young people, especially in towns and among the lower classes, started choosing partners with a bit more freedom. Maybe not full-on romantic walks in the meadow, but something closer to affection than land strategy. The idea of mutual compatibility is creeping in through the thatched roofs of tradition. You've seen the church host more formal wedding ceremonies now, more blessing, more candles, more do you take this person. Before, many marriages were considered valid, as long as you exchange vows in front of witnesses. But by your twilight years, formal rituals are gaining popularity, especially among the ambitious. You remember your own wedding, a loaf of bread, a hand squeeze, a couple of nodding neighbors, that was enough. But now, there are feasts, musicians, sometimes even embroidered veils. Things have shifted, and yet the stakes remain the same. Marriage still means alliance. Children, inheritance. It's still a social web, sometimes a trap, sometimes a hammock. You reflect on the losses, too, the matches that never worked. The girl who married too young and didn't survive her first childbirth. The boy who ran off to join a mercenary band rather than Wednesday the merchant's daughter. The young couple who were truly in love but from the wrong families and ended up exiled for their defiance. Even in this soft light of dusk, the past flickers. You find yourself thinking of your own childhood, of the betrothal ring, the awkward introductions, the first clumsy kiss on a frost-covered morning. You hadn't known what love was, but maybe, somewhere along the way, you found it, or made it, or survived it. And that counts for something. Historians today still argue over how much agency women had, how often love played a role, how widespread early marriage truly was. The records are patchy. The scribes weren't interested in everyday feelings, only land deeds and inheritance disputes. But you lived it, and you know, even in a system that saw you as a bargaining chip, a walking dowry, a vessel for heir somehow, you carved out a life. Maybe that's the most medieval part of all. Not the wooden spoons or the itchy wool or the smoky huts, but the way people kept going, kept hoping, kept marrying. The church bells ring again. You close your eyes and smile. Let the young ones dance. And now, the candles have burned low. The hearth is a quiet glow. The fields outside your village fade into a watercolor blur, and the footsteps of the past soften into the hush of the evening wind. You're no longer the child with dirt under your nails, wondering who you might marry. You're not the anxious teen fumbling with a wedding garland, nor the busy mother watching the bread rise while cradling a baby. You're floating somewhere between memory and dream, where time bends gently, like the edge of old parchment, Your story, like so many in the Middle Ages, wasn't written in ink or song. It lived in glances, chores, shared bowls of stew, and quiet compromises. You didn't get to choose everything, but still, you found moments to laugh, moments to love, moments that were yours. And maybe that's the secret. You don't need a perfect history. You just need a heartbeat that keeps going. So now, you can let it all go for the night. Let the village fade. Let the bells quiet. Let the hay-scented air carry you into rest.